funny. I'm Rabbi Jeffrey Weil, and since I'm at the tail end of my first day as Rabbi of it feels a little funny welcoming all of you to this place, because most of you have probably been here far more often than I have. But that'll change eventually. I'll be here every day. But anyway, welcome, and thank you for being here. This program about bullying, which Marion and Howard have put together for us. Our sages would have been very proud of the two of you and all of you for being here tonight, because bullying is probably a violation of the most fundamental Jewish teaching from the very beginning of Bereshit, beginning of Genesis, which is that it's very clear we are all created, each one of us, B'Tselem Elohim, B'Tselem Hashem, in the image of God. And so when we bully, we deny that of other people. And when we fight bullying, we are upholding that principle, that we are all made in God's image. To bully someone is really to deny their essential divinity and uniqueness. And that's a terrible thing, and many suffer from it. So Yesher Kochachem for doing this. This Torah portion, I spoke about this a little bit in the minyan we just had. This topic relates to our Torah portion. I'll expand on the idea that I shared in our minyan. That in this week's Torah portion, Balak, Parshat Balak, we have a Moabite prophet who has been sent by his king. The king is Balak, the prophet is Bilam. And he's been sent by his king to curse the nation Israel, because he's intimidated. And by the way, I would say that a lot of bullying probably, and the discussion will bear this out, I assume, a lot of bullying probably begins from fear and anxiety on the part of the bullier as well. But so this king is fearful, intimidated by how large the Israelite nation is. And so he sends his prophets, his seer, Bilam, to curse the people. On the way, it's a convoluted story. On the way, the prophet is riding his donkey, and the donkey sees in front of him an angel of God. Ironically, the seer himself, the prophet himself, the seer does not see that angel of God. But the donkey, this brute animal, this dumb animal, sees the angel of God in the path. And so the donkey's going from one side to the other side of the path, and he's aggravating the prophet because he won't pass the angel of God, who, by the way, is holding a sword. And at one point, he goes to one side of the path and he presses the prophet's leg up against the fence, and then he sits down all together and smushes the prophet a little more. And the Moabite prophet Bilam is so angry at this, at his dumb donkey for not moving forward and getting through what the prophet does not see, that Bilam takes his staff, and who knows what he does? He beats the donkey mercilessly. He beats him. Now, I can imagine the anxiety, by the way, that this aggressive behavior is born from, because Bilam is trying ultimately to please his king, and he's on a mission, and he's being escorted by the king's messengers, and so he's probably feeling very anxious himself. And so he, in an act of bullying, is whacking this poor donkey. And then, miracle of miracles, wonder of wonders, the donkey speaks. And he says, "What are you doing to me, Bilam, my master? What are you doing to me? Have I ever been unfaithful to you? Have I ever brought you to a wrong place before? Is what you're doing the right thing? Aren't I a good donkey to you? Have I ever misled you?" And Bilam is compelled to say, "You're right. That is true." And then what's even more amazing to me, perhaps, is that the angel of God appears, not just to the donkey, but also to the prophet Bilam, who had not seen him previously. And this is more inspiring. The angel of God appears and says, the first thing he says is, "What are you doing to your donkey? Why are you doing this to your donkey?" This is really, he didn't have to say it. His main message to the prophet was, the mission you're going on for the king is a bad mission. You shouldn't be cursing the Israelite people. They're blessed people. But I find it really important that before he gets to the real business, the angel of God, really God's mouthpiece, says something, he sticks up. He steps into the conflict between the prophet and the donkey and says, why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this. One little verse he says, and then he goes on to say, and by the way, the mission that your king wants you to go on is a bad mission. And so it inspires. Two reasons. Because the bullied victim here speaks up for himself. That is the donkey. More importantly, a third party, an outsider, speaks up too. He doesn't just let it happen. He could have let it happen, but he speaks up and says, leave the donkey alone. Stop what you're doing. And I think that I personally have probably played all those parts at one time or another in my life, remembering my childhood, both the person who's doing something wrong, probably had bullied at times, inadvertently or not, when I was a foolish kid, and I was bullied at times, and I was certainly a witness as well. And probably most of us can fall into those three categories at one time or another. And the task is, do we rise to the occasion, especially the latter two? In other words, when, it's very complicated, and I know that we'll discuss this, but do we have are we brave enough to stick up for ourselves, which I think is an element to this. At a certain point, the intimidated person, we want to empower them to say, what you're doing is wrong, don't do this to me, number one, if that's possible. And more importantly, when we're the third party, and this is a great Jewish message too, when you're a third party, to open your mouth as well and to say what's going on is wrong. Because we probably have all witnessed it more than we've either been the bullier or the bullied, or however that plays out in our adult lives. We've all been in that sort of situation. So that I assume is at least in part the direction that we'll be headed in our conversation, and I'm very pleased to be here to be part of the conversation with you. Thank you.
Really, that was excellent. Thank you so much.
I'm Howard Romaneck, and starting in the summer now, 44th year as an educator. Officially retired for about 10 years. Well, I've had two retirements at the Glenbrook High Schools. I was a professor at Illinois State University. Doing some teaching now in New Mexico, University of New Mexico. So maybe I'll have a third retirement somewhere down the road. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And looking at the topic, some of you I think were here before. Glad to see you back. Some of you for the first time. And I want to start off just reviewing what I talked about last time. And I threw out a quote, and it was sort of my main point. Eleanor Roosevelt had a great quote. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. No one can make you feel dumb without your consent. No one can make you feel ugly without your consent. And it's a great quote. But if I had Mrs. Roosevelt here to talk to, it is a great quote. I understand what you're saying, but you have to understand sometimes people do not know that they have the power to consent or not to consent. I deal a lot with semantics and language, explaining things to especially young people, a major group that I work with, so they understand some things. So they understand that they are empowered. They don't have to accept that definition. But the problem is, an example, for instance, in September 1752 in England, they were going to go from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. September 2nd was going to be now September 14th. So they're going to lose 12 days. There were people in England upset, and some let the government know they're upset. You took 12 days away from our life. We want it back. How dare you take 12 days away from our life? Did they really take away 12 days of their life? No. But there's some things they don't understand about language, understand about words. For instance, what's this thing here? That hurts, by the way. What's this thing here? It's a fist. Is this fist real? That's what I ask students. Is this fist real? If they say no, okay, stand up and we'll find out. We'll do that. All right, here's a fist. If this fist is real, what happened to it? If it was real. All right, so a lot of things we don't understand about language. All right, fist is just a sound. I make a movement like this. We have a sound to describe this. We call that fist. And language is a symbol for reality, not reality itself. Language helps us deal with the world out there. Language is similar to a map. And as we're growing up, we're learning all these sounds. So I learned the sound growing up at table. In another country, they learn a different sound. So we learn all these sounds so we can communicate with each other, and that's great. All right? But there's other words that we use. We can agree that this is probably a table, but there's other words we use, such as this is right and wrong, good and evil. How do we decide the meaning of these words? How was this decided? Well, for me, a lot of those words, right or wrong, it's because God tells me it's right or wrong. Those are 10 commandments, not 10 suggestions. Sometimes it might be peer pressure. There's been a few times over the years, hopefully a long time ago, peer pressure told me what was right or wrong. So we use these words all the time. But I try to train students and teachers to be, and I'll be doing that again in August with Illinois State University students, to understand what's really going on when we use these words. For instance, when I was a high school teacher, when I still sub at the high school, I'll go into a class, and we have different labels. Gifted and talented, all sorts of names there. And of course, only a small percent of the student body are gifted and talented. So what are we saying about the others? You have no gifts, you have no talents, but we use these words. But I'll go in a class that's so-called below average class. And many times over the decades, I'll walk in, and we're the dummies. We're dumb. And I'll tell them there's no such thing as dumb. When you were born, you came out of the womb, the doctor wasn't going, oh my God, another dumb baby in the world.
Unless he was having a bad day.
That's a bad day. So how did these students become dumb? And they accept it. Because for a good number of years, that's all they heard. You're dumb, you're dumb. They've heard it from teachers, they've heard it from parents, they can hear it from their fellow students. And I try to help them right away. When someone says, you are dumb, all that person just says, I have my criteria. According to my criteria, you're dumb. All right? Other people might have other criteria. And you're not dumb, you're intelligent. I've had history students in my class, they're getting an A in history. Another teacher, they're getting a C. So are they smart in one class and dumb in the other? I mean, bottom line, some teachers, you're dumb if you don't spit back on an essay test exactly what I told you. Smart students spit back exactly what I said. And so I work very hard with students to understand what's going on when these words are being used. All right? Amazing what you can do. And when I work with student teachers and young teachers still, unbelievable power you have with words. I go to reunions, it's 35 years later, they remember my exact words. For basketball players. They also remember, not for me, hopefully, words of criticism, sarcasm from teachers. They remember exact words that were said 35 years earlier. The unbelievable power of words, what you can do with words. I can write a recommendation for a student, you're a person of high principle. I also could write a recommendation, a so-called recommendation for a student, you're a stubborn, pig-headed fool. All right, if I want to stick it to a student, you're a stubborn, pig-headed fool, the recommendation. If I want to help that student get into the good school, whatever the good school is, you're a person of high principle. It's the same thing. It's what we do with words. And I do a lot preparing students, understanding what's involved when we use language. So when Eleanor Roosevelt says no one can make you feel inferior without your consent, I help students understand that you do have the power whether you're going to consent or not. I don't have to accept your definition. All right. And some of those students have been labeled dummies. It's amazing the gifts and talents that they have. It's amazing. Sometimes it's not because they're dumb. They may be bored with the class. Or you can't remember all these history facts. Well, they're not interested. Meanwhile, there might be some rock group. They can tell you 10,000 facts. Don't tell me they don't have certain skills. All right. So that was the main thing that I talked about last time. What I want to talk about now, just briefly, is a problem that I see, and that I see a whole generation of, especially young people, in schools, and I see it more and more in the general society. It's supremacy of feeling over thought. You go to a lot of classrooms. And now when I deal with student teachers or young teachers, I listened to your discussion. It was just feeling, and feelings are important. There's a role for feelings, but it's very important that we not neglect this thing called thoughts. And so you'll see in a classroom, maybe there's Napoleon. Maybe the kids read material, maybe they didn't. So basically, what's your feelings about Napoleon? Why do you feel Napoleon was not a nice guy? Well, why do you feel that? Because I feel that. You can't do anything with that. And sometimes it's a lot of feelings. All right? Thought takes a lot of work. If you want someone to express a thought or opinion, that takes a lot of work. All right? And a lot of times I don't see that happening. There's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of discussions, things that have to be done in class if you want someone to express a good opinion. And I want students to be able to express a good opinion, hold their ground, be able to defend it. Here's my reasons why. Be ready for the opposition. And learn how to respond to arguments. And if you can't respond to some arguments, then maybe you have to modify your opinion. Or maybe refute it and change it. And that takes a lot of work. And a lot of teachers don't want to do that. So a lot of times it's feelings, I'm expressing my feelings. I may express something, and someone will tell you, you hurt my feelings, shut up. They don't know how to respond. We can have a discussion. That takes skill, that takes training. And so the words are flying. Shut up, you're this, you're that. For instance, if someone asked me, say on Thursday, did you hear the decision of the Supreme Court? No, what happened? Oh, this happened, Justice Roberts did this. What's your opinion on Justice Roberts? Well, I could say right away, I think he's right, I think he was wrong. I did not express an opinion. I expressed some feelings, I expressed a prejudice. I still don't have an opinion. I got a pile of stuff I've been reading. Right? And if I'm going to be totally honest in opinion, I ought to read his full decision. But I have the articles here supporting his decision. I have articles here going against his decision. I need some time to read it. I need some time to do some reflecting. And if I'm going to express an opinion, either Justice Roberts was right or Justice Roberts is wrong, I have to be ready for the opposition. You can say there's weaknesses. All right. Connected with that is toleration. I'm very concerned. There's a time in our history there wasn't toleration. Religious wars, Middle Ages, 30 Years' War. And now, especially in the 1700s, the rise of toleration. And what toleration means, someone might expect a belief. I disagree with that belief. I tolerate it. I'm not telling you to shut up. I'm not telling you shouldn't have it. There's a toleration. You can only tolerate someone who has a belief different than you. But what's happening the last few decades, toleration means if you don't accept, you're not tolerant. And we're getting now, I don't like your belief, shut up. And it's a bullying in terms, I'm going to force you to either be quiet, accept my viewpoint, or keep your mouth shut. And someone says, I don't like it when someone forces their opinion on other people. Because I'll tell them, are you trying to force your opinion on me right now? Is there a problem? So we have to start think about what's happening in the name of toleration. W.B. Yeats' famous poem, The Second Coming. The best lack all conviction while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Who am I to say what's right or wrong? While the intolerant people have no problem expressing their belief of what's right or wrong. So I think we have to start thinking and fighting for the word toleration. And that's not an easy thing. Sometimes Jews have heard people of other faiths question something maybe about their religion. You know, the Elena. We don't like the Elena. You're saying, you know, that kind of stuff. Do we tell them to shut up? You're hurting our feelings. Or do we tolerate that? Just as I know some religions, I know Mormons felt that maybe we should tolerate their belief in baptizing Jews who died in the Holocaust. We want to baptize them. Should we tolerate that? I disagree with that belief. Should I tolerate that? Are they entitled to their belief? Because if we say they're not entitled to their belief, how do we respond when it says we don't like some of your beliefs about the Elenu or circumcision, all sorts of things? All right. Okay. All right.
Well, I just want to let you know, no matter who you are, you're capable of both good and bad, as Rabbi had pointed out, Howie. My mother was a wonderful woman, but she used to scream at me. And I grew up listening to screaming. She would be upset with someone, not necessarily me, but sometimes you just let it out at whatever by screaming. And I grew up hearing screaming, so I thought that was perfectly all right. It was just something that happened and blah, blah, blah. So,
Marion, louder.
Yes?
Louder.
Louder?
It's not on, please. Thank you.
Okay. Hello?
Yep.
Yes, that's better.
It flipped down. Thank you for telling me. Is it okay now?
Yes.
And so I learned in my early 60s going to AG Beth Israel when Shalva came to speak about abuse. And they told us about the types of abuse. Well, abuse is bullying. It's just another word. It can be the sound of your voice. It can be verbal, financial, control of any kind, and even humor. Humor can be tear someone down, and if it hurts someone, it is not funny. I think that is something that goes around quite a bit. And I found that I myself have done it, but not realizing at that time. And sometimes people maybe you think they're being bullying you or that they're mean to you, but you need to step back for a moment and think. Sometimes some people will actually use that as a tool to let you know they like you, they're teasing you. Is it the right thing to do? Not necessarily. But where you, all the children, the adults, have to take courage. And if they do not like the way they're being talked to, then they've got to take a deep breath and say something. But it's very important that if you're worried about that person being a physical bully or putting you in danger, then I ask you not to do that in that particular way. But if you feel that that person is not a threat physically, I believe you need to tell that person, people are bullied because A, they're too heavy, they come from the wrong country, they're the wrong color. My doctor was bullied because he used to wear fountain pens in his pocket. And you could be a target for your sexual orientation, you're the wrong opinion, anything, that some people will just take it because they don't know how to practice toleration, as Holly was just saying. We need to step back, listen, let that person's opinion sink in, and just listen. Listen with compassion. Don't already be arguing in your mind, but you can argue with that person. Just listen. If you don't want to do it that way, hey, that's fine. But you have to listen with compassion. That doesn't mean interrupt people constantly. Let them talk, and you sit silently. That's listening with compassion. Not right away telling them your opinion, da, 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 da. And it does create a more tolerant type of feeling between each other. We could be arguing about politics and all kinds of things. So, a deep breath, exhale. It's, in the old days, they'd call it a gainus. It's like, from ancient times, they would go, a sigh of just letting it out. Today, it's meditation, taking deep breaths and exhale. So I think that's an important tool. But having said that, I want you to know that words matter. They can tear you down, terrorize, or they can heal. Words Can Heal is a visionary national media and educational campaign. And I just have the names here, so excuse me if I have to read that. They're designed to promote the value and practice of ethical speech in order to improve our democracy and build a mutual respect, honor, and integrity. U.S. Senator, Majority Leader this was written several years ago, Tom Daschle, A.L. Warner, and Time Venture, the group president, learned leader, Goldie Hawn, Renee Russo, Chicken Soup for the Souls, Jack Canfield, and many others who are active leaders of the initiative. You too can play a keen role. I didn't like thinking that when I heard about it, the type of things that are considered abuse, and that I was yelling at my kids, and I said, oh my God, I'm an abuser. I was like shocked. I thought I was a pretty nice person. I didn't realize how abusive I was. So if that's something I ask you to do, is to learn to look inside. That's very hard. It's very, very hard to make changes on yourself. But in order for things to change, you have to change yourself. You can't be a peacemaker until you change yourself. And so when you look at some of the things you may have done that you didn't realize could be offensive to someone or to your child or to anyone, if you look at that and step aside, you'll start to think more carefully about some of the words you use. And I have a little list here, just to point out, and you have some handouts there. I hope you'll really look at them. It's simple words that we wouldn't even think about. But words of destruction could be something simple like brainless, disgrace, disgusting, dumb, failure, fat, foul, gross, horrible. You hear those words, they sort of cut. And when you use those words at someone, if that someone is maybe been bullied at home and they don't have much of a feeling for their worthiness, it doesn't take much for somebody to tear them down. So the parents are looking to the schools to help the bullying problem. But we have the power at home to help get the child to feel better about themselves, nurture them, give them the feeling that, so what, that person is saying something to me? I know a better person than that. I'm not that stupid, or I'm not whatever. It's giving that nurturing at home and giving that value to your husband at workplace. It could be in the synagogue. And it's not just words that are bullying. It's the power of ignoring someone, not pulling them into your circle, being exclusive. That is very hurtful as well. So you need to, you can't be everyone's friend. And there may be times when you do have to step back, do something for your own protection. But sort of think about who you can offer a helping hand to. That's the beginning of making changes. So having said that, I want to say that if you don't begin that simple practice of listening to your own inner the way you talk, and if you do slip, we're only human. We have to apologize sincerely. If you want to know a little bit about the internet and what's going on out there, there's been 1 million bully sites throughout the world, more than in all the wars of suicide from being bullied on the internet. And if you want to make changes, you have to teach respect to your children, and you have to create family values and rules. You can't be a jellyfish parent. And if you can do that, establish rules, then what I'm about to tell you about cyber bullying and how to protect your children, you have to do that first, because as you know, children have their own secret lives in a way. And if you give them rules, the police department, the sheriff's department says that you should have a computer in a family room or one place and make it a family issue to be on the internet, learn about the internet, and discuss it. But you've got to teach them the rules of safety. For instance, they should not give out the information of their last name because the sites aren't protected. If you put a picture out and it has the background of the house, it's sometimes just enough for somebody to get a clue as to where you're at. So practice, it would be best if the children only stay on protected sites and email to people they know, and don't give information, and don't go meet these people that you don't know. That they have pedophiles lurking, and there was a sign out there. Corinne, could you please get me that? Thank you. There's headlines from the different, would you read those for me? Huh? All right, okay. All right, this is some of the headlines that the Sheriff Dart had in his website. Internet sex trap bag suspect. Stranger danger finds its way into homes through net. Man is charged with soliciting girl on internet. Arrest puts danger of net in spotlight. Cops cast net to trap pedophiles. And it goes on and on and on. It's a wonderful tool. There's a lot to learn, but you must, whether you have children, grandchildren, you want them to get to know what the website's all about. Parents have to learn, and you've been handed out, maybe you haven't, I gave you some internet files to look at, and why should you be concerned about the child using the internet? And the chat rooms and blogs, they sort of interact. It's like the old, used to have a buddy, was it Penn Pals, thank you. And now they just interact live, it's back and forth, so it's fascinating to them. So it's really a tough situation. Bullies, let me see what some, students that are relatively uninvolved in bullying or victimization, 75 to 80%, but at any rate, the details you have, I don't have the time, unfortunately, but please make sure you talk to the kids about internet safety and stick to the rules. It's important. Don't make the rule today and break it tomorrow. It's important. And without those rules, you won't be able to trust in them being able to follow through, because you know how it is, you tell a kid to do this, yeah, and they walk out, put the hat off or whatever. So you've got to establish that between the family. So thank you. What was your question?
I don't know if you agree with this, but I went to a lecture, and he said that if parents don't have locks on their computers, they're evil. He totally believed in locking, having locks on the computer, so the kids don't have free access to it.
Say you should contact your local software dealer and find out what software, and you should have, thank you for bringing that up, and you should have a password so that every time they're online you know about it, and it becomes more of a safe situation. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
I believe that bullying doesn't stop with children. They're just reflecting what happens in the home.
Exactly.
And that they learn bullying from adults. And there are plenty of adults out there bullying other adults.
Oh, yes.
And I wonder if both of you might have something to add about how do adults protect themselves from, maybe at the workplace, so somebody starts rumors about you, you lose your job. Or maybe at a social something, you're being excluded.
Well, I had that around, mid-40s. I had girls basketball coach at Rosenberg South High School, and a district administrator was a bully. And I had a couple daughters in class. He loved me. But the third daughter, who also had class that year, she made some wrong decisions in terms of what she was doing outside of school, and she was suspended for a while. The time she came back to the basketball team, she was no longer a starter. And then all of a sudden, bad mouthing all around school, all sorts of things, and it was interesting. I'd go to the school administrators, and they were a little afraid too. They didn't want to tick him off, and so at times I was sort of out there myself, and twice. So one was at a retirement dinner. He came by, no one saw it. He hit me, as just walking by, did that. And the second time was in the. I was walking to the coach's locker. He was walking the other way. Again, he forearmed me. So I went in the coach's locker room. There was an associate principal, and he said, he just forearmed me. And his thing was, just forget about it. I said, no. And once again, it was calling the superintendent. And the first time, what was going on, and I said, all I know is when teachers had done similar things, they got themselves in trouble. People were sort of wondering, what are you going to do when it's a district administrator? I said, well, this is different. But after the second time, I called again. And I can handle, if you just want a verbal, I can handle that. But this is 2 times now, and I think he wanted me to react. And there would be no witnesses. Maybe he'd go file a complaint or so. But the second time with the superintendent, I said, that's it. All right? Next time he does that, I'm going down, I'm filing a complaint, then you can deal with it when it's headlines in the local paper. Never happened again.
Thank you, Marion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that you can all call 911 if you're having a physical encounter that you're afraid of or something's a perpetual thing, and they do have a social worker who will help you. That is, I have checked the Skokie police, and they will do that. They are also willing to come to the schools or anywhere to teach you more about how to handle bullying. But there's a couple of things I think you should remember. First, as I alluded to earlier, when you have somebody repeatedly bullying you, and you're not afraid of the physical encounter, because if you are, you've got to call the 911. But it's also valuable to have, if you have a friend, to have them near you so that they can come over and say something simple to you, and the two of you walk away from the bully. Now the bully's left there standing, and also, if they complain about what you're wearing or whatever it is they don't like, just tell them you don't like what you see, look the other way. Or you might say something like, I don't know, just, I lost what I was going to say. Yeah, I saw the hands going up and I my brain lost it. Let me answer the questions, maybe I'll come back. I think you went first.
Yeah. I know everyone has been discussing, the grandmother and the kids bullying on the bus. And I was having a conversation with a few people the other day, and we all felt that a generation ago, there wouldn't be kids bullying a senior citizen, ever. They would never, ever do that. And I'd like to get your input as to what you think has changed in this generation that you can have 7th or 8th graders treating a senior citizen.
I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think that part of it that's changed is the fact that there are so many single family homes, maybe not a community that's involved in helping each other. Maybe there's not enough involvement with churches and so on. So there's not a feeling of camaraderie and protecting each other. So I think they feel, who cares? Just who cares? And they're going to go ahead and do it. But the father did react. Now, if you talk to if you have somebody who's being bullied, or if you ask the child, why are they bullying you? What is it they're trying to get to the child or the adult and find out why are they bullying you? When does it happen? What are they saying? Are they still taking your lunch, or what's going on? And then you can aid, if you have a school that's cooperative, and you may not. You may have a principal who's got a bully attitude. You don't know. I mean, it goes on. And yes, we're even here in the synagogue. There are situations where people are excluded, and that's a form of bullying. So it depends on what kind of things are happening. So you've got to confront, and then if the school doesn't contact the bullying family, then perhaps you've got to do it, but you've got to do it in a kind way. Because if you start screaming at that parent because their child is a bully, they may not know. So now the bullying parent needs to talk to their child and find out why they're bullying. And if you work back and forth between you, hopefully you might be able to work something out. And then you have to test the child who's the bully and say, you take away some of their playtime or something that means something to them. But don't make it an insurmountable task. If you're going to be good for tonight, then tomorrow you'll be able to have some playtime. So he sees it as maybe a possible task, because sometimes that same child who is bullying at home or around the neighborhood with the kids doesn't bully at school. Why? Because they laid down the rules that this is exactly what's going to happen to you if you do that again. And the response is immediate, and they know it, and they stop bullying, but they continued with the kids in the neighborhood. So it's very important to try to communicate with your child, whether they're the bully or the victim, or they could be both. I was a bully and a victim. Rabbi said he was. It can happen to anybody. You don't even realize sometimes that you're a bully.
Referring to your question, I think quite a few parents want their children to be their friend.
Yes.
And the parent has to be the parent. You need to know your child's password. You should be able to take your child's phone in front of them and say, I need to protect you, so I want to see, what's happening, what you've got on your phone, your history, your Facebook. And if they trust you and they know that you're there to protect them, then they won't feel like you're spying, but you're in charge of them.
For their protection, you are here.
But there was a study that came out teenagers are still doing a pretty good job of. Parents think they're keeping it on top of everything, but the study came out, teenagers are still coming with new ways of still keeping,
Right.
their secrets. Again, just quickly, yeah. Right, but just quickly, the comment on cyberbullying. Okay.
It was actually a time out. In the back, we really could not hear what her full question was. It would be nice if we could.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I do want to just quick, fast comment on the cyberbullying. The thing that really scares the heck out of one cyberbullying is, unlike a bullying that goes outside the home, a bully is coming right inside your home, and parents, you may not even be aware of it. You may not even be aware of it. Sometimes a place of security and protection. Cyberbullying, a bullying is coming right into your home now, and sometimes you don't even know it.
But that's where you check
Right,
history.
right.
That's where you
Right.
check their Facebook.
Right.
You're on their
Right.
Facebook. Of course, I could still train you, I'm sure.
I have some questions I'd like to learn on that, but we did pass out some questions. Did you all get your questions? And what you'd like to do is to break into little circles.
We can't even hear the question.
What? They're
You're on a
doing
sheet.
All right, the sheets. All right, there's questions here. Oh, okay.
All right. We'll have the session break, and then I'll hand the microphone to whoever wants to talk. Okay? Later, so we can go on. Yeah, we have so what we're going to do is break into session. Keep your rows and spread a little bit. Get into little squares, ovals, whatever you can do. Well. Howie just said there's tables back there. If you'd like to use the table, or if you want to just stay here, that's fine. Just take your chairs and sort of make your little circles if you wish.
There's questions if one really grabs you want to talk about, or if there's something on there you think is more important than here.
You have about 15 minutes for that break, session break.
I'd like to ask a question of Marion and Howie. We talked earlier about the bus monitor. Thank you. We talked earlier about the bus monitor, and I think everybody saw that videotape where she was being harassed mercifully by all these other young men on that school bus. Do you think she should have stuck up for herself more? Because one of the things that happened, I noticed, was that she was crying a lot, and she didn't respond. At least that was my observation of the videotape, and I just want to know what other people felt.
Yes.
Absolutely. Don't you have to be very careful dealing with children now? You can put your finger on them.
I think,
You
I
can't-
don't know, absolutely. Somebody else.
You can't respond to them.
Was that a private bus or was that a school bus?
School bus.
What was she doing on the school
She's
bus?
a monitor. I'd like to know what the bus driver was doing.
Yeah, right.
That whole time. I couldn't pull the bus over, possibly, and I know it was never
You know,
addressed.
some people said they couldn't hear each other with the questions. So I'd like you to maybe step up and use the microphone and put your questions or your comments so that everyone can hear. And those of you who are sitting further back, you can come more forward. And yes.
Because I'd like to know, from both of you or anyone sitting here, I think it's a really, I think it's a
Wait,
really...
bring them.
I'm okay, I'll talk out. Oh, I don't need that. That's
Okay.
I think it's very difficult to know whether you are an adult or a child, when to intervene and how to do it. I think this is the central question. I mean, I can't identify with the woman on the bus, but my heart went out to her because I think she was so beside herself. I mean, what could she really have done? I mean, there's so many examples. I know a school that I worked at for many years, a junior high school. One of the girls, I worked in the media center, so I saw a lot of kids. And one of the kids came up to me and she wanted to talk to me privately. I said, fine. And we went into another room and she was just crying and crying that there was a group of girls that were picking on her. And she was...
Step up here. Please. Pretty please. I don't mean to bully you, but people love it.
You're bullying me.
tracked it. People want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, did you hear what I said so far? Okay.
Marion, be
So
careful.
she-
Marion, be careful. There you go.
Anyway, so this young lady was quite hysterical. She didn't know what to do because there was a group of girls that picked on her every day, and she would deliberately stay at school a little bit later so as not to be confronted by them. And she said, is there anything you can do to help me? I don't know, I have a feeling she did not discuss it with her parents. That was my conclusion. But being in the media center really was a wonderful advantage because I knew the girls, and when they came in, I just kind of bent over backwards, just kind of talking to them in generalities, and we had a very nice rapport, and I never really talked about bullying, but we talked about many other things. And pretty soon they were coming in individually just to talk to me, and it was kind of like befriending them, if you will. And they kind of mellowed out. And for some reason, the girl was not being attacked after that. Now that worked because I happened to be in a prime location, okay? This will not always be the case. But I do think it's difficult, especially in today's world. This isn't when I was growing up and somebody, we didn't call it bullying, like somebody's teasing me or somebody's picking on me. Fine. Nowadays, you don't know what that person's going to do. And especially in some of the inner city schools, I'm sure that this is a very difficult thing. So anybody that wants to comment on what I've said, I would appreciate it.
Well, comment.
Excellent.
I know, thank you. Are you ready to comment too?
No comment, but I have
Another question? Let me comment on hers now, please. Okay, thank you very much. It is a difficult situation at best, especially when you have some schools who are not accepting of the rules guarding against bullying because they themselves have been bullied or are bullied. So all you can do at that point is to try to contact directly the parents of the bully and the bullied. And when you speak to them, I would suggest that you speak to them in a truthful but kind way. Be truthful about the problem, but you want to work with them on overcoming it for both the children's sake and everyone around. So I think it's attitude, attitude, attitude. So that is the most important tool you have. And if you can't get the help you need and should get through the schools, parents need to step up to the plate and get together and form their own little groups and start from your own self and your own family and ask them to do the same, and a little group forms. And sometimes you just have to take the initiative and call the superintendent or someone or the police and tell them you need help because this is what's going on. And don't wait till you have a whole plan in place. Just call and tell them your story with compassion. And hopefully you will get some response. That is my hope. And thank you. Thank you.
Well, just one fast thing, and then we did have him here for a Margie Lipsham Shapiro. What not to do if your child is bullied. There's some things you ought to be aware about too. Sometimes parents, you can handle it the right way, and sometimes you may respond in such a way you may make it worse for your child. And even parents can talk to the bully's parents. This is her thoughts on this. Only if they know the family, know someone who does, are confident the parents are well-meaning, attentive, likely to respond reasonably.
Which is very rare.
Which can be very rare, because sometimes, or you go to the parents, and then they take some action against their son, and that son can't wait to get back at the kid that he was bullying. So,
and then the parents can.
But it has to be given back and forth between the parents, and they have to keep in touch. Otherwise, you won't know what's going on.
First of all, my compliments for you to bring this subject forward. It is very important. But I would like to make a pitch. Those of you who have not been to the Illinois Holocaust Museum, I highly recommend you to go to the lower level. There is an informative, ultra high-tech educational area dealing with how to deal with the bullies.
Like
To
Hitler.
give it,
Like Hitler. The biggest bully.
right. Anyhow, what they, very shortly, what it teaches is for the children, they sit down in front of a terminal and there are X number of questions. They answer it, and then it teaches them whether they will be a bystander or an upstander. Will they defend their friend who is being bullied or look the other way? And it is so cleverly set up that the children enjoy it. They make comments afterwards, they can write it down. And then there's another room that's real fun because it's all electric. You chase a frog and so forth. So I just had to step in and recommend this for the young parents because the museum itself naturally the artifacts are very graphic, so that is for a 6th grade on to be seen. But this particular department is exclusive for children from 6 years and above.
Thank you,
do
David.
that.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Shelley, thank you.
I'd like to tell what happened with my son. I was very concerned. My kids, guess what? Small, little, short genes are very strong. They had a big father, but my kids were very little. And I had concern from the beginning of their schooling that they were picked on. And I talked to other people, and I found a solution. It takes time. But a woman told me that she sent her kid to karate school. And I looked around when my son was in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I mean, I knew this was when they were young. And I picked the one, not the Park District one that was a once-a-week cute thing, but I went to the storefront place, looked over a couple of those, and sent him to a place that really, what it did was it gave him some skill. It was no super whatever, but it gave him confidence. And when he went to junior high school, he came home, 7th grade. He said, some big 8th or 9th grader, he said, Mom, I got to tell you what happened today. It was within the first week of junior high school. He said this great big kid came up to him, took his t-shirt, picked him up, and held him up against the wall. And that kid said to him, I heard you're not afraid. And he looked at that kid and said, that's right. And that kid put him down. So talk was around. And he never had another problem in the whole of junior high.
That's a great story.
Someone gave me that clue, and I knew it was important enough to do it.
Great.
They did it well.
No.
Who else wants to pass up? Come on, Phil.
Schools have to buy a program, so sometimes it's hard to get the schools to buy the program. But it's called peer counseling. And when the children fight or they hear that there's going to be a fight, they get the people who are involved, and the children are trained on how to, question each other. And there's an adult there, and they even mete out certain kind of discipline, and they all end up agreeing on it. But it's a program, and so you might want to ask your school to actually look into these peer counseling programs. That's a little suggestion.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on what Phyllis said. I have a friend, she's a teacher in Deerfield, in the Deerfield Public Schools. She teaches 4th grade, and we were talking about this bullying at lunch the other day, and she said in her school district, for as long as she can remember, they had a program called Second Step, and it's very similar to what Phyllis said about peer counseling. Basically, the teacher, I can't tell you for how many hours in a week, maybe 1 or 2 hours, she has the children play roles. a moral decision that might happen in their household, or let's say there had been a fight at school, she will take the kids and she'll put them in a circle and she'd say, okay, now you pretend that you are the child who was bullied, and you pretend that you are the bully, and you pretend that you're the father of the bully, and so on and so forth. And she says, how would you respond to this particular situation? And it's not just the bullying situations. For example, she had a child who was misbehaving. She called a timeout, and then she started doing this whole role playing during the class time. And a lot of the problems ended. And I told her, I was not aware of this program called Second Step. I said, where do you find out about it? She said she didn't know. All she knew is that they've been doing this in the district for a whole bunch of years.
Thank you. I also know that sometimes they do have peer media, and sometimes when all else fails, they will put two kids together and they will have them hand wrestle to get out their frustration, their anger. So that could be, if it's guided, rather than people getting out there and fighting and pushing and everything else that goes on. That's like another way to help resolve something that needs to be done, but only if it's guided. And it does go on in some of the high schools around here. I know they have counseling of all kinds for that. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Matt McLaughlin, and I have shared in 2 districts. One at Highland School for my son, who was in preschool at the junior high, from 4 years old on until 1st grade. From there we moved to District 73.5, which is Middleton School. We encountered that program, Second Step, at Highland School, and embraced it because it was something brought on at that moment, at that time. And if you really play an active role in it, it can work. I'll give you an example of it, how when he was in 1st grade there at Highland, there was a student that he was introduced to as Stinky. He didn't know his first name, and he just picked up on, oh, Stinky. But then he started realizing that this kid was being called Stinky everywhere, and no one would use the bathroom after he went in there. And he was picked on, and if he got rubbed by him, you got the cooties or something like that. And even bigger kids were doing this to this boy Stinky. He woke up one morning and had a vision and said, there's got to be we got to put a stop to this. This can no longer go on. And I, that morning, wrote exactly what his vision was and sent it to the principal at Highland School, and she applauded his efforts to recognize that this can no longer exist. And it's a 1st grader that brought this principal and took the teachers all in that 1st grade and said, let's review the Second Step, let's preserve this kid's innocence who was being bullied, and step forward. And it was because of him. I mean, he has achieved. Riley, you can come on up here, be with me. And do you have anything to say about that, or would you want to talk about, or want me to say some more about how the Second Step program has not worked at the second school?
What would you like to do? You could say it. If you want.
Give him the mic.
Give him the mic. I think
he's a little shy, but let's just recognize that here's a person who really believes in zero tolerance. He doesn't accept the attitudes of adults who will disrespect children, and adults in the school system who think that they're there and that they're the only ones that deserve the respect, and no children. Children need the respect of all before anything. They deserve the love. They deserve the compassion and our arms around them to guide them. Yes, we're adults, we're getting bullied through this world, but the kids are first. We have to sacrifice ourselves. The most altruist act that we can do is be a voice for them and give them the example. And I can only say that he has been my hero. He has given me the vision to know that we can conquer this with love and understand that the love has to be delivered to the bully, because this person here, and we all know, we all have somewhat bullied and not recognize it. We have to learn to recognize it within ourselves and love ourselves. Really embrace who we are and our journey to improve society. And this boy, unbelievable at his young age, is on his own, has got this soul, an old soul that wants to deliver harmony among all of us and to be at peace with everybody here, and no matter where you stand in life. He loves life. Pardon me?
What happened at the second school and how is it different?
Okay, this school prides itself on being proactive, yet they themselves
We're already used to be bullying so much, and they couldn't get out of the habit even with second step. So they were so used to seeing all the adults doing this and that, and then after second step, a little like 1 minute later, they would see bullying, and then they would start getting used to that all over again.
Where is this school?
John Middleton Elementary.
Yeah, but where? What is it?
On Main Street.
In Schofield.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, in Schofield. Okay.
Yeah. What's the result? What's the outcome?
There is no result there because they pride themselves on being so strong and proactive that they don't want for someone to go against the grain and try to expose this blemish that surrounds this district. And yet there are so much good. There is so much good that comes out of it, but they are living on laurels of their past and not the present. And we live in the now, and we have to deal with the now, not what was going on and what brought this school to high recognition, truly high academic recognition, honored by the President of the United States for being one of the best schools in the nation.
So the parents need to get together.
That's McCracken, that's right, I'm sorry. That is
Parents need to get together.
Middleton feeds into McCracken.
Right.
So maybe the staff,
I'm sorry. Okay.
So the staff just has too much pride to accept the ideas of a child?
Yes.
Is that it?
Oh yeah. They actually put him in an office and bullied him in the office too. They even threatened him and said that if let's keep this a secret in our room right here and not let it go anywhere else.
I hope the superintendent has
No,
that letter.
the superintendent's aware of it too.
Next to police, social worker. Yes. You wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. I have a question. I thought it ended in something better for your school district.
I would hope it
Obviously it didn't. I had a title for a book for you guys. Speaking up for Stinky, even though I hate the euphemism. You know, maybe that's just should be written up and it would be a book on bullying. What didn't happen, it should have.
I think we need this to be a 3-hour session with all the, yes?
Maybe your wonderful son, Prime Minister Marshall, will be from Isaiah. The child will lead us.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you. I just want to end this before the Rabbi takes over, and I wanted to read this to you. Some healing for a woman bullied as a teen. A woman who was bullied mercilessly in high school 25 years ago has gotten some closure from a class reunion page on Facebook. Lydia Frederick, a graduate of Orange Glen High School of Escondido, California, in 1987, posted a heartbreaking poem about her experience on her school's 25th class reunion page. Excerpts. The little girl who came to school with the clothes she wore the day before. Instead of asking why, you picked on her. The little girl had bruises and was dirty. Instead of asking why, you picked on her. That little girl was me. That little girl had love in her heart to share with all, but no one wanted it. This woman has grown up now. However, the little girl inside me still cries because her childhood was shattered. The post resulted in an outpouring of support and regret from former classmates. This poem touched me so I could not sleep, I cried, Lisa Wallace told NBC San Diego. Wallace and many others contacted Frederick to apologize for those years. They've created a scholarship fund in her name, raised money to fly Frederick to the reunion, and she has agreed to go. Frederick says she has forgiven her classmates. And there were a number of others, and they raised funds for her to do that. So there was something actually really wonderful that happened as a result of the internet and Facebook. Yes?
A couple of years ago, or maybe it was the 50th anniversary, the graduating class that had given the black students such a hard time in Little Rock, Arkansas, when the schools were integrated in 1957 and the federal marshals had to step in. And the pictures that were shown in the papers it was amazing in this country how hateful. There was a woman that one of the girls, the then girls, thought was a little sympathetic or empathic, and she was really getting ready to spit on her. Well, these kids' former classmates apologized like 50 years later or something. But the hurt was still there, but they somehow worked through some of it together. And then last year, I think, or 2 years ago, Oprah went through when she had her own show, and it was such a big thing. She had former neo-Nazis that had been in that group 10 years earlier, or 15 years ago or something, and maybe 25. She had them on the show, and they had gotten to the point where they changed and were remorseful. It can happen. It doesn't happen enough.
Yeah, well, listen, in my 60s, I learned I was abusive, and I had to go back to my kids and write to them and talk to them and let them know how sorry I was, and the healing began, and it finally is taking place. And I'm 79 as of now, so it's very, very important to work on it. Whenever it is you know, acknowledge it, apologize, and work on it. It's very, very of utmost importance. Rabbi, can we ask you to take over?
By the way, happy birthday to Marion. It was your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I would have thought you were still in your 60s.
We all know that. That's the biggest news tonight.
I was told 16.
I love Yates. Well, first, by the way, I'd like to say that I've learned so much from you, and I've really been led by Howard Romaneck and Marion Rosenberg. Thank you so much for your teaching tonight. We're grateful. Yates, if I get this right, Howard, the best lack all conviction.
While the worst are full of passionate intensity.
While the worst are full of passionate intensity. And the way we cultivate the best is to do what we're doing now, is to share and to learn and to develop really how this has affected me this evening, to develop sensitivity and strength. Sensitivity and strength, which are not exclusive of one another. To be sensitive to bullying and to be strong enough to stand up to it in the right way and at the right time. So for us, strength to strength on that journey to counter this violation of that bedrock Jewish ethic that we're all made B'Tselem Elohim in God's image. And I'd like to take the rabbi's prerogative to call upon Rav HaGadol, Rabbi Brief, real leader here to offer a quick closing word.
A brief word.
A brief word.
I've been bullied because I haven't been brief.
But with love.
What a day for Rabbi Weil, the very first day that he's officially on the pulpit here, and we wish him many, many years. And I'm sure all of you joined with me. And if you haven't made your reservations and you'd like to be at a Shabbat dinner this Friday evening, call the synagogue office, because it'll be the very first service that we'll be privileged to join with him in worship together with Cantor Wachowski. So it's this Friday evening and Shabbat morning. And I just was privileged to be at the Minyan a few hours ago to hear a wonderful Devar Torah about the Torah portion, and it inspired me to think about the Haftorah portion, because a Haftorah portion completes the Torah portion. One is from the Bible, from the 5 books of Moses, the Torah portion, and the Haftorah is usually from the prophetic portion, one of the books of the prophets. And this is the special portion of the prophet Micah. And Micah is one of my favorite Haftorot. It doesn't have too many chapters, it's one of the minor prophets, but it concludes the 6th chapter, the 8th verse, with this phrase: "It hath been told thee, O man, O humanity, what is good and what does the Lord require of you?" And what are the 3 phrases? To do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. 3 beautiful phrases: to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And basically, if you don't want to play for the Chicago Bulls and be a bully, I think this is the guidelines, because I always think of the Bulls as charging right before they start the game. And you don't mind Bulls charging and playing the game, but in the game of life, we have to live and let everyone have a piece of the action, so that we're all partners in making God's world a better place, rather than trying to have the survival of the fittest by putting someone down in order to raise ourselves up. So the prayer is that Rabbi Weil, who invites me to say these words, has a most successful tenure at this congregation, many, many years of health and fulfillment, and he lives by the adage, Mahi gid lecha adam, what has been told you, O man, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Thank you.
I would like to conclude one more conclusion. I'm sorry. Rabbi Weil, I would like you to step over here. Rabbi Green, you've been given this before, so forgive me. Last time you were here, some of you heard the story. It was about a teacher in New York who honored her students by telling them what she liked about each individual one, and she presented a ribbon, and that ribbon said, "Who you are makes a difference." And who you are makes a difference. And she told them what difference they made individually in her life. And she gave them each 2 ribbons to go out into the community and talk to different people and tell them why they are important to them. And one of the students went to a CEO that helped him decide on what his future was going to be. And so he went to that CEO and gave him the ribbon saying, "Who you are makes a difference," and asked him to take another one so he could present it to someone else. In other words, put good words, good deeds out into the community, and they wanted to report back at the school. Well, the story that concludes this thing is to show you what the value of kindness and good words and expressing them. Not just thinking them, but expressing them, because we're not all mind readers. The CEO went to his boss of the company And he apparently was not well liked, but he was brilliant, and he thanked him for his leadership and what he had taught him. And he was very shocked to receive it, and he thanked him. And he did accept the ribbon, and he took that one extra, and he was deciding on the way home who he should give this ribbon to. And he decided it had to be his high school son. Comes home, calls his son to sit with him. And he tells him, you know, he says, I know I yell at you. And I always say you don't do enough or you didn't clean your room right, and I complain. But I want you to know that you and your mom are the two most important people in the world to me, and I love you. As many times as I tell this story, he starts to cry and shake, the young man. And he said, Dad, I wrote a letter to you and Mom. When you were going to sleep tonight, you were going to find a suicide note, but I guess I'm not going to have to do it. So any kindness you can offer someone, when you walk inside the door and somebody's holding it for you, you can say something like, thank you, that's very nice. Take it one step further, if you would, and say something personal like, that's so kind of you. I've had people, and I said this before, when I've done such a simple thing, strangers, they want to do something else for me. And I've had people hug me and cry. You really, really don't know how you can help give somebody a hand up with a kind word. So please don't forget that. And those of you who have not already received this Who You Are Makes a Difference pin, I'd like you to get it. And after we break up for refreshments, I don't want to take too much time to go to each individual, but this young man here, he has to get it for me. I prayed for him to be my rabbi, so I got my way. And he does make a difference. He's a fabulous teacher, and he has a big heart, and I know that already from my conversation with him. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being who you are. And okay, now refresh a minute. Help yourself. And